right, my fellow explorers. So wherever you're at on your coloring, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Now, I know that a lot of you can still kind of mindlessly color and pay attention, and I'm fine with that. Now, what you do have in front of you is notes for the day, and they are a little bit different than our standard notes that we've had so far. Front page, back page, we are going to do both of these today, so I just want you to know that. We're going to start on this page that is not as colorful, okay, the page that says the Columbian Exchange. And you can see that, well, if you're going to turn it to the normal up and down, it says label the old and new worlds. I'll make sure you know what those are. Draw and label the line of demarcation, something we talked about yesterday, but we'll review it. And then just pay attention, because in these boxes, you're going to be writing certain items, and you got to follow the arrows. Make sure you know which direction they go. Just kind of setting you up so you know how to take the notes. Now, one thing I didn't really have on this page is like the flat-out definition of the Columbian Exchange. So I'm going to suggest that you use this small little white space down here. When I tell you the definition, actually write down the definition. So this should be pretty descriptive of the Columbian Exchange once we're done talking about it. And then on the other side, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but last year I didn't have real access to a color printer. So I'm pretty excited to be able to print things in color, and this page is in color. So this is the triangular trade, and we're going to talk about that. You can see, you might notice that our room is shaped like a triangle, so it might have something to do with triangular trade. Ask you to label the consonants, indicate which products move along each leg. That is something we'll be talking about. And then highlight the middle passage, also something we'll be talking about. Same story. I didn't really put a box for the flat-out definition, so I would suggest using the open ocean down here. Write the definition as I get to it. So that's just a little bit of a setup. And I will say, how part of our class is going. I know there's a band concert going on, so I have started the live video, and that way I'll be able to share it with them. And it's almost like they didn't miss class at all. So just be aware of that. That is not something I always do, but something that we do have going on today. So we are squarely in the age of discovery. We talked about 8 big key figures. Now, of course, there are more, but we've talked about some pretty important ones. We talked about the motivations for discovery. What are some of them? Oh, God, yeah, right. And Walt Disney himself has turned it into a little jingle. Pocahontas, of course, these are early explorers, and they come for God, gold, and glory. I like to, GG&G, the 3 Gs, that is definitely like a really academic way to remember it. Sometimes I say riches and religion. That's just Mr. Swanson's version of putting 2 R's together. Riches in religion is a big motivator, but of course the God, gold, and glory as well. This is all review. You guys are leaning into this. The line of demarcation, review mode, but you might want to pay attention to it because the Columbian Exchange calls for you to sketch the line of demarcation. Somebody describe it to me. I taught it to you yesterday, so somebody describe it to me. Jackie. Excellent. We got the Pope involved, and she said the 2 halves very well. Which country got which half?
Spain and Portugal.
Spain and Portugal are the 2.
Spain got North America. Spain got North America. Portugal got.
I heard it. Yes, Spain got to the west of the line, which is why they got to sail into the Americas. Okay, why we have Christopher Columbus sailing west to try to find a route to the Indies. Of course, he lands flat on North America, which he didn't plan for. And then Portugal is allowed to explore east of the line. That's why most Portuguese explorers are hooking around the tip of Africa, the southern tip of Africa. It's because that is where they were directed to sail. Why is it notable that the Pope got involved? Where does it place the church in their lives? Huh?
The top.
Yeah, that's right. He's like the one figure in the world that everybody would listen to. Spain has its own opinion and has a king. Portugal has its own opinion and has a king. But they all united under the umbrella of Christianity, Catholicism, so they all listened to the Pope. So just one more example of how religion was very dominant in people's lives. They actually solved their crisis, solved their problem without going to war, but by listening to the Pope. So this is the line of demarcation, and ladies, you said it pretty well. Spain got to sail to the west. Portugal got to sail to the east. And on your notes here, I see some of you not writing. On your notes here, what you should do is draw the line of demarcation and it needs to kind of bisect South America just a little bit because Brazil still belonged to the Portuguese. So it's the strong red line. I know we talked about like the dashed line, and then they moved it over 1 year later. The strong red line of demarcation, and it gave more, it established who could sail where. So just doing a little sketch, right? Every time you take your hand to the paper, it helps your brain remember it just a little bit more. That's why we drill these facts. One more picture, just kind of showing the whole world there, but it's the same line. All right, now, I forgot one thing. Don't really forget it. You need to pull out the notes we've been on as well, okay, the blue and the white, because there are 2 boxes still to go, and actually we're going to accomplish that right now. So I know you got 2 pages on your desk right now, but just pull that out. And the first one we're going to talk about, it's actually that bottom box, is called the astrolabe. And I will just be as upfront as, honest with you. When I started teaching world history, I did not know what the astrolabe was. So I learned right alongside you guys. Of course, now I've taught the class several times, and it's something that's fun to talk about. What these 2 items are, astrolabe and compass, you may be more familiar with the compass. These are pieces of technology that enable discovery, enable exploration. These guys couldn't just like head on out and wonder where they would land up. Now, I know we talked about some of their navigation, they did land up where they didn't exactly expect, but it is also a time period where these small technologies are helping them navigate. These days, I know a lot of people like don't go to Baxley without putting it in their GPS, right? These days, you're going to pull up your iPhone and go, boop, 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 boop. Why'd you snicker? That's me, Mr. These days, a lot of people are really reliant on that box in your pocket, and we ask it, where am I going? How should I get there? Well, imagine these explorers using these very simple technologies to go across the ocean. So that's what I'm going to describe to you, is how these technologies enable them to explore. Astrolabe. Now take the word itself, kind of break it in half. What do you think?
Could you say that again?
I don't know what I say that makes her talk to me like that. Like, I don't know what the key word is that wakes her up. So I'm going to have to figure that one out. Astrolabe. Take that word, break it in half. What do you think it's related to?
The stars.
Excellent. Astro, astronomy, stars. The astrolabe would use the stars and the position of stars to help these explorers determine their location on the Earth. And in particular, it used lines of latitude. So these are the lines that go circular around the Earth, and they're not physical lines on the ground. You go outside, you don't see a painted line of latitude, but they are geographic markers on the Earth, and it's something you probably talked about as you discuss geography in your younger years. Well, the astrolabe uses the position of the stars to determine an explorer's location of latitude. And this is how these explorers would be able to track their progress on the map. They would take many, I'll keep saying it, many readings of their lines of latitude, and they would gradually track themselves on the map as they crossed the ocean. So here's how it actually worked. I've never actually held one. I would love to have one to bring into class someday, maybe. But you would put one portion of the astrolabe even with the horizon line, and then you would put the other, kind of the moving arm portion, directed at the North Star, because the North Star is known to be a constant in the sky, never moving, never changing. So the horizon changes, right? Their position changes, but when they mark it to the North Star, it gives them a reading along the dial there, tells them where they are. So this is how the astrolabe would help them mark their progress on the Earth. Could be used on land, okay? I mean, someone could still use it to mark their progress, like when talking to Lewis and Clark, they walk across the land. But as we're talking about ocean-going navigators, they would really use it to mark their progress across the wide open ocean. If you're walking on land, you can see mountain peaks, and you can know that, okay, I'm going to that mountain peak, and then I'm going to the river, and then I'm going to the intersection. If you're in the wide open ocean, you've got nothing around you other than flat water. Like, you really need to track your progress, or else who knows where you're going to end up. So this is the astrolabe. This is one that is maybe a little less familiar to you. And what you really need to know is that it tracks position on the Earth. This next one might be a little bit more familiar to you. Has anybody ever used a compass before? Yeah, now I'm not talking like everyone has a compass on their iPhone. Did you know that? You whip out your iPhone. It's one of those default apps that's like already there. I don't think you can even delete it if you want to. You have a compass on your iPhone right now. This that I'm holding is actually a military lensatic compass, but this is the type of original magnetic compass that these explorers would have used. And I'm going to show you a couple pictures that shows how the compass grew across time. You know, it was in use as early as the 1200s. Probably in China was the earliest form of a compass. But what a compass does is it shows your position on the Earth, your position of what a compass does is it shows your direction of travel. Astrolabe position, compass direction of travel, and it uses the Earth's magnetic field. In a compass here, now as soon as I tilt it, it's not going to work just right because you do have to have it flat. But I'll tilt it here, and you can see a north, N, S, E, and W. What do you think that stands for?
North, south, east, west.
Excellent. North, south, east, and west. The north arrow is magnetized. There's a little tiny little magnet in it, okay? And it is drawn to the North Pole, the Earth's North Pole. Now, without getting into too much science here, the Earth is magnetized. There's a North Pole, there's a South Pole. You ever played with magnets, maybe on your refrigerator, or you got like two little magnets? If they're connected, that's because they have opposite poles connected. Or sometimes they repel each other, right? That means you have the same pole looking at each other, and sometimes it's fun to play with magnets when they repel each other. Well, the same principle, the same science is in a compass. The north arrow is magnetized, and it is drawn to the magnetic field of the Earth. It will always point north.
What if you have another magnet interfere?
Yeah, Liam makes a great point. Sometimes, like this compass right now, might not even be working super well inside the building. You do generally want things to be wide open around you. Military perspective, sometimes if you're navigating, and even if I have my rifle, they slung across my chest, but I got my compass too close to it, yes, there could be interference. So to really work a compass, you kind of want it to be by itself. You want it to have no interference around it. So Liam, you're exactly right. It's not a perfect science because there could be interference. Exactly right. Right? Just did I see a hand? See a hand? Nope. Okay. So the big take here is that the compass shows the direction you are traveling. And if you want to be traveling south, then you want the northern arrow to be focused. You know, the north arrow is always what's going to move. You just got to move yourself around it otherwise to make sure you're going the right direction. Compass is broken into 360 degrees. Did you know that? 360 degrees in a circle. So a lot of times navigators will say we're traveling on the heading of 270 degrees. 270 degrees, that's due west. Well, why don't they just say west? Well, it's because sometimes navigators speak in terms of degrees. If you want to get real precise, they might say we're traveling at 161.5 degrees. Oh, that's very precise now. Okay, not just like, head towards the horizon line. Head towards the sun. We all know the sun rises in the east, sets in the west, but that's not very precise. If you want to be very precise in your travel, the compass will help you do that. Early compasses were often just a magnetized needle set into a pool of water, and the magnetized needle would float around the water like that. Kind of progressed to setting a little box-like setup, like you see the picture there, and the circle, the dial here, would turn around according to the magnetism of the Earth. Another good example of an old compass right there. Words on the screen, pretty much everything I've already said to you. And then kind of a bit of a more advanced compass here. You can start to see the tick marks. The tick marks indicate the degrees, and that just gets you more and more precise. So knowing the direction you're traveling on the wide open ocean is related to using a compass. And one more little factoid for you. When you look at this right here, and this is a moving little image, but this portion right here, north, south, east, and west, and then you got some like supplemental directions there as well. What does that shape kind of remind you of? Star, or it's actually called a compass rose because people think it looks like a flower blooming a little bit. So if you ever hear people say the compass rose, they're not talking about a flower. They're talking about that shape on the compass right there. So I know a compass is maybe a little bit more familiar to you than an astrolabe, but I still probably explained it more in depth than you've ever heard before. I bet some of you are going to check out the compass on your iPhone here in just a second as we go to the restroom. Here's the big summary on the technology before we get in. We'll take our bathroom break and lead into the next step. Astrolabe uses latitude to determine position. Compass uses the magnetic field to determine direction. So for all the words I said, and I know a lot of you took some good notes, make sure you have at least this. The astrolabe uses latitude to determine position. The compass uses the Earth's magnetic field to determine direction. And these two very simple pieces of technology are still the heart of navigation today. Ships may have, big old radars, and, they have a whole area where the captain is in control of all the different pieces of technology, right? If you've ever been on a small boat, from a small boat to a big cruise ship, the idea is still the same. You need to know where you are, and you need to know what direction you're going. So there's a whole bunch of new whiz-bang pieces of technology that help you know that. But at its simplest, you need to know where you are, and the astrolabe helps with that. You need to know where you're going, and the compass helps with that. So these early explorers really paved the path for people to continue navigating on the ocean or on the land still today. That is technology. What are your questions? Do you have questions? Cool. All right, we're going to get to the triangle in the room here in our next portion. Let's go take a break, take our bathroom break. When we come back, we'll have plenty of time to do that. It's hard to walk with a peg leg. Just try it sometime. Try it sometime. Ladies, come on. We got to go. It's not optional. I mean, you're wrapping up your notes, that's one thing, but you're just sitting there not moving. That's not okay. I love your in-depth notes. The fact that you need more space to write. Take notes in church.
Not pushing me, baby. Isaac, you just gotta record pushing me. I'm gonna show that to the police. You did not record when you pushed me.
I'll be dead ass. It's your accent, I'm conscious. I'll get what you're saying. Sorry,
No, you don't.
All right, so technology, we wrap that one up. We move on now to this is a pretty big idea, and it is on, it's the Columbian exchange side of your notes. So just hearing that as a namesake, the Columbian exchange, who do you think gets credit for this Columbian exchange? The Columbians, the country of? Not quite. How else have we talked about that word? Root of the word Christopher Columbus. There it is. So we've talked, and actually Columbia, the country, draws its name from Christopher Columbus as well. Because again, he landed much closer to South America than North America. So we talked about Christopher Columbus. We said he's not that great of a guy, but he does get credit for this type of exchange. And the Columbian exchange, like as a simple definition, is this. It's right here. A two-way exchange of plants, animals, diseases, and ideas between the old world and the new world. Two-way exchange, plants, animals, diseases, ideas, and culture. I left that word off, and culture between the old world and the new world. It is named for Christopher Columbus because even though he didn't land where he thought he was going to, even though he colonized and was a harsh governor and not the great white, savior that a lot of people want to make him out to be, Christopher Columbus was not a good guy, but his namesake does live on because he was one of the first to leave the old world, land in the new world, and he opened the doors to this travel between the old world and the new world. This is a picture here that does kind of show him as that good guy. He got a cross on the sail, so maybe that's implying he's coming with the name of Christianity or a missionary attitude. He is basically like, I've arrived and I am claiming this land. I have discovered this land. Well, of course, what is probably slightly outside of this picture? All the people who were already on that island, right? He didn't discover anything. He just arrived there. And then we talked about how he started taking over in not a good way. But some of you are wrapping up this definition. The two-way exchange, plants, animals, diseases, ideas, and culture between the old world and the new world. Now, when I say old world, what am I referring to? Old world refers to Europe. We've spent our whole conversation so far in this class has been about the old world. When we're talking about the birth of, Greece and Rome, that's old world Europe. Mesopotamia and Egypt's in Africa, but it's this side of the Atlantic Ocean. The Crusades were in Europe, that's the old world. Everything we've talked about so far is the so-called old world. Well, people finally leave the old world, sail across this big old ocean, and arrive in the new world. This is a very early map, and it shows the Eastern Hemisphere old world, the Western Hemisphere new world. And the Columbian exchange is just saying that the door has been opened between the two. And because of this, products that were only ever in Europe are now going to find their way to the Americas. Products that were only ever in the Americas are now going to find their way into Europe. And I bet you're going to be surprised as to what some of these products are. And that's the boxes. You see the boxes with the two arrows. You're going to list some of these products here in just a second. Okay, you wrote your definition. That's great. But you're going to list some of these products here in just a second as well. So the Columbian exchange, this is a part of your definition, plants, animals, and diseases. And we said culture and ideas. Yeah, but plants, animal, diseases, those are the big three. Plants that were only ever in Europe found their way to America. Animals that were only ever in America found their way to Europe, and the world has never been the same since. But also, of these big three, which do you think is perhaps the most significant disease? Disease, that's right. Hard to put your finger on a disease, hard to say that this, particular, microgen came from so-and-so, but it was the exchange of disease that had the greatest impact. Plants, food, makes a big difference. Animals, I'm going to blow your mind with the history of the horse here in just a second. But it was the disease that was the most significant and greatly contributed to death in various portions of the world. Because people had never been exposed to certain types of diseases, but now it's being introduced to their body, and their immune system is not ready for it. So disease was the most important, the most significant of these exchanges. All right, here's another really good map, and it just starts to show you some of the products. So from the old world were cows and horses. There were no horses in America before the Columbian Exchange. We think about cowboys, the old Wild West. We might think about Indians riding, horses bareback without a saddle. There were no horses in America before the Columbian Exchange. Now look at some products that were unique to the Americas. Pineapple. There was no pineapple in Europe. Pineapple is native to the Americas. Corn. Corn is native to the Americas, not Europe. Now these days, it's hard for us. We're such a global world community. Like we are global citizens. You could go to vacation in France, you're going to find corn. Go to vacation in Australia, you're going to find pineapples. But pineapples were originally only in the New World. Pumpkins, that's another one as well. And then this is actually my favorite picture because it shows the exchange pretty clearly. So from Europe comes, and this is where on your boxes, I'll use my example here, on your boxes, this top box here is items that moved from the Americas to Europe. So that is basically the top line right there as well. And then the bottom box, items that moved from Europe to the Americas. And that is your bottom line right there as well. So take a second and actually just write down these items. And as I'll kind of elaborate on each of them as well. So a big one from the Americas to Europe was tobacco. Tobacco is going to have a leading role in the rest of the American story because it's going to lead to southern plantations needing labor. That labor comes in the forms of slaves. Slaves are going to become a big deal, leading all the way into the American Civil War. So tobacco, big history with tobacco. Some of you, I believe, colored some tobacco leaves. Turkeys come from America. Sweet potatoes, avocado, pineapple, cocoa. The cocoa bean, like literally chocolate, comes from the Americas. Potato, tomato, corn, and vanilla. All of those items come from the Americas.
Don't forget about the beans.
Went to Europe. Yeah, I skipped a couple in there as well. Peanuts, right? Good Georgia boys like some peanuts, like Jimmy Carter. All right, well, here's what we can be thankful for from Europe. From Europe, we get the grape. Anybody eat a grape recently?
Yep.
You eat a grape here in America, well, guess what? It came from Europe. Bananas, citrus fruits, the honeybee. I know I got a cousin that, keeps some beehives and he raises honey. He makes honey right here in Georgia. The honeybee itself came from Europe. We would not have honey in the Americas were it not for the Columbian Exchange. Bananas, olives, peach, pears, Georgia, the peach state. Guess what? Peaches originally came from Europe. There were no peaches native to the Americas. And perhaps the one I am absolutely positively most thankful for is the coffee bean. The coffee bean came from Europe. The coffee bean was not native to anywhere else. The coffee bean comes from Europe. And then I did kind of skip one, livestock. That's a big deal. Like anyone here, FFA, 4-H, if you raise sheep, cattle, pigs, horses, if your family has anything to do with those, and Abigail's not here today, but I know her family does horses a lot. You got horses, Liam's got horses. Horses were not native to the Americas. Horses did not start their life journey in the Americas. Horses started in Europe. But because of the Columbian Exchange, all of these items started to flow from Europe to the Americas, from the Americas to Europe. So I know a lot of you sketched down most of these. I'm gonna move one more screen here, and I like this one because it shows all the diseases, all the types of diseases that left Europe and came to the Americas. And this, unfortunately, was a one-way exchange. The Americas didn't send any diseases back the other direction. All the diseases came from the old world and flowed into the Americas. And the most deadly of them would be smallpox and malaria. Smallpox and malaria were the two worst kinds of diseases that came from Europe to the Americas.
They
So,
have like the flu.
yep, influenza. So the basic influenza is right there as well. Let me make sure we're on the right page here. This box should be populated with the items that are on the left-hand side of the screen. This box should be populated with the items that are on the right-hand side of the screen. So I see some of righteous, that box right there should be the items that moved from Europe to the Americas. That's the right-hand side of the screen. You don't have to list every single type of disease, but you can just simply say disease and understand that several diseases came with that. So, do the notes make sense? I know there's a header in each box. Should be following along and make sure that you got each kind right there.
Did they
Talon
like grow
did
these?
it right. That's good. What?
Did they like grow?
Grow what? Each of these items. So that's a good question. They might have brought over the whole fruits. They might have, with the whole fruit comes the seeds. Seeds would be most important, right? If you want to grow the item, you need to have the seeds to keep growing the item. The climate mattered as well. Some of these products may not have taken to American soil very well. So maybe they brought some products that didn't stick, but these are the products they brought over that did stick, that were able to grow in the American climate, the American soil. Now these days, a greenhouse can grow pretty much anything. But at the time, of course, you have to deal with the natural surroundings, the natural climate. Jackie?
Isn't it right that we're not going to get no more avocados?
We're not going to get any more avocados?
Yeah.
You're saying right now?
Yeah.
I don't have that answer. Where'd you hear that? What'd you read about?
I've been hearing it all over.
All over the news? Is that because of just
What about the Ukraine daily Ukraine update?
Yeah, I'll get to that in a second. This is a big class with moving pieces, and I just got to get to the end of this class. I don't have the answer on avocados. Interesting topic. I think I just saw an avocado commercial on the Super Bowl though, right? They're always trying to sell avocados from Mexico. All right, so this is the Columbian Exchange. Here's the big summary of this is the big summary of the Columbian Exchange, okay? So I know little back and forth on the conversation there. Did it make sense? We understand the two-way exchange, plants, animals, and diseases. We're grateful that horses and cattle came over. I'm grateful that the coffee bean came over. It's interesting that the certain products originated in America, like the pumpkin, turkeys, chocolate, vanilla, all that kind of stuff. All right, that is the Columbian Exchange. Now there's one more big type of exchange that happens, and this is where we're going to get kind of active in the room, so hang with me, and that is called triangular trade. So flip your notes over to the colored page. You see that it's really pretty well set up for you already. We got 3 continents. You got a triangle in between. You're going to have to, turn it where you can read it. And like I said, use that open ocean to write the definition, and the definition is right here. A multi-step system of trading in which a country, okay, write that definition right there. A multi-step system of trading in which a country pays for its imports from one country by its exports to another. And I'm going to explain the whole thing using the triangle that you see in the room right here. Triangular trade, it's all right here. Write that definition right here. Triangular trade probably implies how many steps in the process? Three, that's right. Triangular trade is 3 steps, 3 legs, if you will. And I'm going to take you on the journey of a trading ship through the entire process of triangular trade. I'm going to explain several things that are posted in the room here, and I'm going to be climbing over a couple seats, kind of excusing myself around a couple of you as my ship goes on its journey. So you might need to turn your head, crane your neck here and there as I walk around the room, and then I'm also going to have key information on the screen, on the slides as well. So you got that definition. Ooh, Knox wrote it right in the middle of triangle. I think that's a good place for it as well. Multi-step system of trading. Ooh, and CJ drew the line of demarcation. That was bonus. I like it. So here's what I want you to imagine. I'm a ship. I got my ship on a stick, right? My printed off ship is on a stick. I am starting at this body of land right here. Now, can you tell? Oops, sorry, man. Yeah, Knox nailed it. That is Europe. That is the outline of Europe. I am starting in Europe. Leg one of triangular trade goes from Europe, or we can say England, to Africa. On leg one, my ship is full. My ship starts empty. But here I am at the port in England, and I'm going to fill my ship up with manufactured goods. England was known for having factories. England was known for having industry, whereas other parts of the world weren't that advanced just yet. And the type of manufactured goods they had mostly were cloth materials, which is a fancy word called textiles. Some of you have sketched or you have colored in cloth and material. And ironworks. Not a lot of places, yeah, there you go, cloth and textiles. Not a lot of places in the world were able to work with metal or iron. So the factories in England were able to manufacture iron type goods. And the most important of those was weapons. So I see Blaze has created a very chic looking gun there. And Logan has his laser blaster. But cloth materials and ironworks, mostly weapons. That's what my ship is full of right now. And you can see along the leg, I call it, it's labeled as manufactured goods. So, Liam, I got to slip around here somewhere. I'm going along leg one. I'm going to cut in front of Madison here. Sorry, buddy. My ship here, whoop, 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 is going along leg one from Europe to Africa. And and as you can look at the screen there as well, it might not be exactly a straight line. I might cut into several different parts of Western Africa, several different ports. But when I get to Africa, what I'm going to do is offload all of my manufactured goods. So I'm going to offload my cloth, my textiles, my ironware, my guns. Another manufactured good is rum. Okay, rum is actually a processed drink, and it was actually very valuable in the world. Not talking about alcohol too much in this class, but rum was also manufactured good. So along the west coast of Africa, I am offloading all of my manufactured goods. Well, now that I have an empty ship, I don't want to just sail home with an empty ship. I want to keep the trading going. What can I put into my ship in Africa?
Animals.
That's a guess. Say it again. Slaves. This is true. Okay, now this is a hard conversation, and we're going to have a grown-up attitude talking about this. But they viewed enslaved Africans as a product, right? We know that they are humans. We're going to talk about the horrors of slavery a little bit. But this ship right here, my trading ship, viewed enslaved Africans as a product. So they sold all of the manufactured goods, and now I'm filling myself up with a new product, and that product is humans. They are slaves to be traded. Well, the second leg of triangular trade goes from Africa to the so-called New World. And if you look all the way down, you're going to see an outline of the Americas. I'm headed to the Americas. Looking at the screen there, you can see the ship going along this route. And this is a leg that has its own nickname, and that nickname is Middle Passage. So this second leg in triangular trade should be easy to remember. It's 1, 2, 3. So it is the middle one, Middle Passage. And the reason it gets nicknamed Middle Passage is because it's known for being brutal to the people on the ships. The dreaded Middle Passage, the brutal Middle Passage. It gets its own nickname because of how terrible it is. Well, as we're going along the Middle Passage, the big open ocean, I could stop. There are many different possible stops, such as South America, the Bahamas, the West Indies, or all the way into the North American South. We know that slaves were traded in North America, southern states, and of course that leads to the plantation economy, ultimately leading to the Civil War, where there's a difference between the North and South. But my ship has now made it. I'm going to scrunch around Mimi here. My ship has now made it into North America, and I'm offloading my product. Now they're people, but the people who were selling them would have viewed them as a product. So I offload my product, and that leads me to I want to fill my ship up again. Okay, I don't want to go home empty-handed. I want to fill my ship up again. What is America, or what are the Americas known for having? Raw goods is exactly right. Some of you are smart. You see it on the triangle here. What type of raw goods were known for being grown in the Americas? Cotton, tobacco, sugar. Okay, like the big three is cotton, tobacco, and sugar. And some of you have drawn something along those ways right there. Now, wheat and barley could be used to make the rum, so we could throw that in there as well. But the big three is cotton, tobacco, and sugar. My ship is full of these raw goods. I'm going back home. I'm going all the way back home to the old world, to Europe, to England. I have to jump over Thea here. There we go. Making it all the way back to Leo. I am completing the triangle. And back in Europe, I now offload all of these raw materials because cotton is going to be used to make cloth. And sugar is going to be used to make rum. And tobacco is going to be used, well, you know what, they're just going to smoke the tobacco. They don't make that into a manufactured good. But the raw goods flow into the factory system. And then guess what? I'm ready to load my ship up one more time, head out with manufactured goods, and do the process all over again. So this is triangular trade. It was a never-ending triangle process where they went from these three different regions and they carried specific goods along the way. So if you're paying attention, but without taking notes, now you need to kind of turn to your notes. You need to label each continent. Europe, you could also put the old world. North America, you could put the new world. Africa, and then make sure you got what is on, no, it goes like this. What is along each leg? Manufactured goods go into Africa. Enslaved Africans go into North America. And then raw materials come back to Europe. So does everyone have, go ahead and take a second on your notes to do exactly that. It's colored for a reason. I hope the colors help it kind of pop out to you. And you just need to fill in some of the labels a little bit. I know that writing on the ink might be a little difficult, so do the best you can. But make this all accurate. Make this, accurate to the triangular trade. I see some really good notes having been taken. So I'm just going to leave it on this screen for a second. You should make your page match this screen. Logan, you have your notes? You ready to finish them up? Okay. So what we're going to do here in just a second is you're going to take your colored page and you're going to put it. What you got?
Which one is the
New World is the Americas, so North and South. Yep, the New World is both Americas.
Why is traveling the Middle Passage so hard?
Excellent. So Isaac asked about the Middle Passage. In just a second, I'm going to elaborate on the Middle Passage. We're going to have a pretty grown-up conversation about the horrors of the slave trade. So good question. I'll get to that in just a second. What we're going to do right now is you're going to take your colored page, and I'm going to offer each of you a clothespin. Okay, and if you need two to kind of flip it up on either side, that's fine as well. I got plenty of clothespins. But I want you to take what you colored and put it on the correct part. So if you have a manufactured good, you're going to put it on this portion of triangular trade. If you have a raw material, you're going to put it on this portion of triangular trade. If you have a question about what you have, I can try to help you out, but I hope that you are paying attention. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be putting up some pictures along the middle passage here. Okay, I'm going to put some pictures up along the middle passage here so that we can kind of talk about the slave trade a little bit together. So go ahead, and this is a chance to move around the room, get a clothespin, one or two, however many you need, and put your picture up.
Over there?
Yes.
Man. That's what I saw. I would never even think of you to say me.
Oh, see,
It's
no.
between
Yeah, it's a main check. Yes, we did wrong.
Raw sugar.
It broke. Mr. Swan.
You're just too strong for it.
So if I was you, I would make it.
There is the thing for that.
You got a laser and a crutch.
Yep.
Oh, real stop.
Oh, bro.
All right, you guys may be tidying up your last little hang-ups. If it needs two clothespins, that's fine. I'm hanging up some pictures here on the middle passage. Maybe start to take a look at them.
Oh my God.
Never in my life.
What?
Hmm?
What?
Hmm?
What are you talking?
I was with myself.
No. So if you're done hanging your picture up, look at these pictures of the middle passage. I'm going to ask you what stands out to you here in just a second.
Alright.
Now, Zakaya, why couldn't you put yours all the way at the end? You had to put yours right beside mine. That's
Good morning, Miss Williams. You know what? You feel free to quiz them as I finish hanging my pictures up. I feel like they got a lot to tell you today.
Alright, so what are we learning in world history? The age of discovery. What are they discovering? Trade. Ah! There's a reason this is in this shape.
That's right.
What is triangular trade? Among who?
if you don't.
The new world, the old world.
New world, old world, alright? So what did the new world need from the old world?
Raw materials and all that.
Okay. What kinds of materials? Now, this is us getting it from Europe. Come on now. Peaches and grapes and coffee and stuff that we weren't yet producing. What did they get from us? Tobacco,
Cotton.
cotton.
I got a setup
Hang
here.
on.
Liam, will you take Miss Williams through a cycle of triangular trade? But you can do it, just like I just
Do it. Do it.
Liam.
This
So-
is Europe and the manufactured goods, and then
Your ship starts out empty, but what do you put in it?
manufactured goods, ironwork, forged stuff like guns, weapons,
And then what's the other big one? It's kind of the picture closest to you.
cloth.
That's right.
And then you go to Africa.
Excuse yourself around. Do it just like I did. There you go. There you
Come
go.
on, Liam,
Make
you
some
can do it.
space.
And you go to Africa and unload right here, and then they give you slaves.
Okay.
And then you go to North America.
What was this second leg known
It's
as?
the middle passage.
Uh-huh.
And you go to North America, unload your slaves, and get cotton and raw materials, and go back to your zone.
Because you don't want to go home empty.
That's exactly
So every
right.
leg of the journey, you refill your boat. The same boat has now taken the whole cycle, is returning home. And Liam, is there rest for the crew?
Get out.
Or what are they going to do? You're going to fill the ship up one more time, right?
Yeah.
And just start it all over again. Hey, snap for Liam. That was good.
Okay, very good.
This is what we're trying to
And
do.
this is actually, that's one of the highest levels of learning is when you can take what you've been taught and teach somebody else. And so kudos to you, Liam, for being willing to get up and do that. And even if it's not perfect, take the risk, go through, do it, because if you can talk about it, you've actually come to a higher level of learning it. If you can't talk about it, but you say, what do we sometimes say? I know the answer, but
I don't remember.
I can't think of it. I can't get it. I can't, it's in my head. Well, that means maybe you partially learned it, like it makes sense to you, but yet you can't pull it out. Just like I was in my office just then and they called about a parent who was here to see me and regarding a student. And when they said the student's name, I went, it's in my head, like, why do I know that name? I know that student's name, but I could not think of who that student was. So I log into the campus and I pull up and I was like, there it is. See, have I fully learned that student? No, it was in my head. I knew that name. I had to log into the campus to put the name with the face versus, I know Mr. Righteous Princeton right here. You're not going to let me hang. You better get that hand out here and shake my hand. I know who he is. So I'm working towards learning that. So yay, got
Miss
some
Williams,
sugar
before you
cane.
leave, Miss Williams has taught me something valuable, and that is that for human, along the lines what we talked about, for humans to really learn and understand something, we gotta see it, touch it, feel it, engage with it about 7 times. So I know I might sound like a broken record sometimes. We talked about it yesterday, and then the first thing I do on a new class is start reviewing. That's because I'm trying to let us hear it, see it, feel it, touch it, engage with it about 7 different times to lock it into our brains, which I say a lot. So Ms. Williams taught me that, and that's exactly why we do it
That's
in class.
exactly right. That's right. All right.
Thank
Have a
you,
great
Vivian.
day.
All right, what I have here is a couple of raw goods that actually come from just a couple miles down the road. This comes from my wife's family farms, you know, the different land that they have here in Alma. And what is this? Cotton. Okay, now I picked this at about the Thanksgiving time frame. After they had gone through the fields and actually harvested it, this is kind of leftover. And Casey goes, my wife goes, what are you gonna do? Take that to your class? I'm like, yeah, I'm just showing what cotton looks like. She goes, they were mountain. They know what cotton looks like. Like, okay, I know we know what cotton looks like, but I still want to just bring it to you and show it to you. This is cotton in the raw. This is cotton right off of the plant. It is not ready to be made. It is not ready. This is not cloth, right? This is not
Cotton's ready to be big.
This is not a manufactured good. This is the raw material. Now, Liam, what did you say?
I said, do you know another way to tell if cotton?
Teach me something.
You go up to the cotton and you'll pull a piece of the cotton out.
Okay.
There's seeds in it. You'll bite the cotton and the seeds pop in your mouth. That means it's ready to be big.
Look at that. I didn't teach you anything. You taught me something.
It's cotton. It's just cotton.
And then there is, so to get to the human labor side of things, right, how difficult is it to pick cotton? There are some sharp barbs in there. And think about people working in the fields, and yep, there's a lot of slave labor, picking cotton by hand, just, you know, tons and tons of cotton, right? Bags and bags, bushels and bushels of cotton starts to tear up your fingertips, your cuticles. And so, you know, picking cotton so that we can have cloth is not just like something that magically happen. There's a lot of labor involved. Jackie? Cotton gin, no, so by this time, no. Jackie mentions the cotton gin. Cotton gin was invented in, I believe, 1810-ish. You have to catch me on that, but not exactly in this time period. Cotton gin is going to revolutionize labor in the fields. Actually, it makes it less labor intensive, but it increases the demand for labor. Because the cotton gin, this is a little extra, okay? Because the cotton gin made it easier to process cotton, then southern plantation owners were like, hey, we need even more slaves to work the cotton gins and harvest even more cotton. Made it easier to pick, and that was an advancement, but it actually increased the demand for slaves. So really a good fact there. I'm glad you know about the cotton gin. What is this? What am I holding here?
Sugar cane.
That's right, sugar cane. And I've had this in storage down the hallway for about, I don't know, 5-6 months now, and it obviously kind of dried out a little bit. But this is raw sugar cane, okay? Okay, this is a product that would have sailed across the ocean as a raw material. And Liam, what's your favorite thing to do with sugar cane? CJ. Oh, okay. You put it into the machine that crushes it. That's excellent. I've never done that part. Chew on it. It's kind of what I was going for. My Casey's uncle, he'll just cut a little piece, and he'll cut just a little sliver and kind of pass it around to the kids, and they think it's cool because it kind of tastes like gum. But just chewing on the sugar cane in the raw is something that is just kind of fun to do when you're harvesting it on the farm. So I brought in these two raw materials just to kind of show you what we were talking about, specifically something that we're talking about. So I'll put that along the raw materials section. It's flanking a whole lot more than than I thought it would. Okay. We got a couple more minutes here. I know it's an advisory day, so Righteous, put your phone in passport. I know it's an advisory day, so we got to wrap up a few minutes early. I want to have a real important conversation about Middle Passage, about the slave trade. Okay, so it's kind of a grown-up conversation. You can see the pictures that I've hung up for Middle Passage. They are pretty shocking to the consciousness, right? These are not happy pictures to look at. These are difficult pictures to look at, but it's a part of history we have to talk about so that we don't repeat it. There's an old saying that if you don't know history, then you're doomed to repeat it. We got to talk about the slave trade so that we understand how it happened. And in understanding how it happened, maybe your generation, right? You're going to leave this world someday. Your generation can make sure that we never repeat it. And we may not repeat exactly the Atlantic slave trade, but we want to make sure we're not oppressing any people group in the same way. We don't want to repeat our history. So let's talk about the slave trade here for just a second. It's kind of a grown-up conversation. Now, first of all, if you look at this picture right here, you can see that it wasn't just one location involved in the Atlantic slave trade. You can see that all along the western coast of Africa were port cities where these ships came from Europe and stopped all along these western coasts. Now, what I love about this picture is that the thicker the line is, the more people traveled that direction. So if you see a kind of a skinny line, that means fewer slaves would have traveled along that line. But when you got a real thick navigational route right here, that means a lot of slaves would have traveled along that line. Here's something that's hard to understand, really important to understand. The slave trade started with wealthy Africans in Africa. Wealthy, elite Africans, black people, black-skinned people, would conquer and enslave fellow Africans. They would bring their prisoners to the coast to be sold, to be put on ships. So nobody is like clean and clear and innocent in the slave trade. Europeans, North Americans, South Americans, Africans. There is a harm that happens at all levels here. And a lot of times the slave trade started with black Africans who were enslaving their own people, bringing them to the slave coast where they would be put on ships and sent out to market. So you can see that slaves went into Brazil, slaves went into Argentina, Central America, the West Indies. Actually, a very few amount of slaves end up in North America. I know we go on to have a full civil war about it. It's a major part of our history. It's rooted in slavery. But in terms of the grand scheme of the slave trade, of the 15 million people sold, only about 500,000 actually made it into North America. Something unique about North American slavery is that a lot of times families would procreate, have babies, and there'd be more slaves born and more people born into slavery in that fashion. All right, moving right along here. Similar picture, and again, the thickness of the line shows how many people moved along it. So you can see here, there's like little branches onto these small islands. Not many people got taken to these smaller islands, but still some people did. And then again, skinny lines going into the Georgias, the Carolinas, very few into Virginia, etc. Many more into Cuba and Jamaica and Brazil. Just kind of interesting to think about. It wasn't just slavery traded between Africa and the American South. There's a lot of slavery happening and a lot of people involved in the horrors of slavery. So disclaimer, important conversation ahead. I've kind of already said it. We've already talked about some of these pictures. If you need to put your head down or step out, you're welcome to. But if you want to be here for a big conversation, kind of grow your brain a little bit, that's where we're going. So I'm going to show you a couple pictures about the slave trade, and these are very similar to the pictures that are hanging on Middle Passage right now. This is, obviously there's no photography, there's no real pictures from the earliest part of the slave trade. But we do have sketchings, we do have drawings. So when you look at this picture here, what type of people do you see?
Naked.
Okay, so they've been stripped of their clothing, right? And sometimes that's part of your dignity. Blaze says they're all black. Like in this picture, they're all black. What's the spread of ages, man, woman, child? What do we see?
All of them.
Okay, all of that, like I just said, man, woman, and child. You got a mother. You clearly have some infants, a baby who's even getting a piggyback ride there. What's this guy holding? A whip. So is he driving these slaves to the market? Makes the point that I said earlier, the African slave trade did originate with African elites who took their own countrymen, their own people, to the slave market. If you got conquered, if your village got raided, and you were the weaker person or you were the weaker tribe, you could find yourselves on a slave ship heading to who knows where. So yes, this man has a whip, this man has a gun, he's the overseer, and then there's just some brutality, there's some oppression happening in the middle there as they march off to market. Next picture here shows maybe possible punishment or just showing how the power was asserted over the African slave trade. Now, what I do see here that there is a European involved. This is a very European military uniform. His skin looks a little lighter, kind of hard to tell. His skin looks a little lighter. But who's the man doing the whipping? Fellow African. And why do you say he's a slave? Aha, he is in shackles. So I don't know the whole story of this painting. I wasn't there. But sometimes those who were enslaved were still used to kind of enforce or continue the oppression to their fellow slaves as well. But what I hope your heart is shocked at how terrible this is. This is not normal. This is not right. This is not consequences. We talked about law and order. Like if you do the crime, you got to do the time. Maybe a little bit under the Code of Hammurabi. This is not normal. This is not right. We should never accept this as a correct punishment or consequences for anything. All right, Isaac asked a little bit about what was it like on Middle Passage. This is a picture of a slave trading ship. Now, we said it's the same ship that would have made all three legs, but when it got to Africa, it transformed itself into a ship that was able to hold as many humans as possible. And they were packed as tightly as possible. And in fact, this is a primary source sketching. This is basically a sketch about how to pack as many people as possible in a ship. And it says right here that there is a shelf and it only gives 2 feet 7 inches above the people's face. So they'd be laying down, I'm not going to do it right now, but they'd be laying down and they have 2 feet 7 inches before the shelf comes above their face. That's their whole world. 2 feet 7 inches, not like breathing room. You ever take a long car ride and you just got to get out of the gas station and stretch? No chance for that. These men, women, and children are packed as tightly as possible, even in the aisleways, in order to have as many as possible on the ship. Now, they wanted them to be healthy, okay? So they did feed them. They gave them water, right? Because you can't sell a dead slave. So they wanted them to be healthy and alive, but at the same time, it wasn't a luxury ride, okay? They weren't taking great care of them along the journey because they wanted to take as many as possible. Now, they weren't shackled for the whole trip. Okay? They weren't shackled for a 5-month journey across the ocean. There was time where they would get out and do chores on the ship. They would stretch their legs a little bit because you lose your muscles if you didn't use them. But for the most part, they traveled in a very cramped environment like that. This shows maybe the other side of the slave trade. Once they actually got to market, what type of people do we see in this picture now?
Black.
Yeah, now we have black and white. Who seems to be in charge the most? Okay, white people. Which guy in particular?
Thing.
The guy behind the podium. Okay, the left-hand side of the screen. Yeah. What do you think he's doing? Yeah, he's auctioning them off, or he's the head salesman, maybe. We got families here. Maybe they're at risk of being split up. We have a mother nursing her child. Will they go together? Will they be split up? We don't know. A little bit of background here. Now we have a white man who's whipping an individual. You got white people basically inspecting these slaves, these humans, as if they are animals, right? When you take a cow to market, my FFA people, right? You show off the cow, you try to show it's healthy, maybe show its teeth, you show its muscles, you say what it's, you say how many pounds it is. Well, that's what they're doing with people. That's not okay. That's not right. This is an advertisement for slaves, right? These days you get advertisements on your social media feed. It's like, whoa, how did they know I wanted to buy that? Well, this is an advertisement for prime slaves. Again, we're talking about people, but they're being treated like a product. And another one here, just arrived, 250, healthy. They arrived from here. They are free of smallpox. So again, they oppress they oppress their people with pictures like this, right? They're cramped together. And when it came to sell them, the slave sellers wanted to make it seem like they were super healthy and that they didn't have any problems at all. And then this is kind of that last thought. This is the lasting result of the slave trade. Now I know this picture here, I know the story behind it. This man was freed following the American Civil War. So I don't know how he arrived to America. He might have been born into slavery based off of his age, but that whipping and that scarring is a result of slavery. That is a lasting effect on the human body that kind of represents the slave trade or the brutal Middle Passage. So I've showed you some big pictures here so that you'll have an understanding of how terrible the Middle Passage was. It wasn't just a part of triangular trade. It's actually like a lack of humanity, a terrible part of human history that the triangular trade included the sale of human beings and the mistreatment of them in this fashion. There's several good resources you can think about if you wanted to study a little bit more. There's a movie, a little bit older, but there's a movie that captures the slave trade and the slave ships pretty well. It's called Amistad, based on a true story. I like the story. It actually shows the slaves rebelling against the people sailing the ship. So these slaves basically said, hey, there's more of us than there are of them. Let's try to rise up. Let's try to take over the ship. And that's the story of Amistad. But in the movie, it also shows the horrors of sailing on a slave ship. So if you wanted to see that a little bit more, that might be something you look into. Saw this headline, came across my social media feed a little while back, so I threw it into the presentation here. Many slaves who sailed on the Middle Passage, many people, I should say, who sailed on the Middle Passage, they actually chose the sea. And what I mean by that is they threw themselves overboard because they didn't want to even make it to the other part of the triangular trade. They didn't want to make it to market. They didn't want to make it to North America and be put into slavery. So they chose the sea. Yeah, we might call that suicide, right? They chose to die. But, and then a lot of times mothers chose that for their infants. There are stories of mothers throwing their infants overboard. Yes, knowing that they would die, they would perish, but they were choosing to get them out of slavery by choosing the sea. So this is, what's that? Well, so this is a bunch of different circumstances. I don't know, everyone's circumstances would have been a little bit different. This is a piece of art. It's very poignant, very powerful. It is at the bottom of the ocean. Okay, these are statues that have been sunk and they rest on the ocean floor. I don't know how deep down, but it shows like a solidarity thing. Clearly, this is not something that happened in real life, but it's representative of the slaves who traveled on Middle Passage, the humans who traveled on Middle Passage, but chose the sea instead. And in a way, that is a super courageous decision and its own act of rebellion to avoid being found in slavery. And then finally, I'll finish with this resource, and I know that we've got to round out to advisory here. This is an awesome website that I've explored a little bit. I haven't had a chance for a class to really explore it yet, and we're not going to do it today either. I'll post it on our Google Classroom. It's called slavevoyages.org, and it is super interactive. You can see a slave ship in 3D, a timeline, maps of people who moved along Middle Passage. So for those of you that are really interested in kind of an immersive technology type experience, slavevoyages.org. I'll post the website. Might be something you want to browse. So this rounds out our learning on Columbian exchange and triangular trade for today. Of course, we'll review along the way. I'm glad Miss Williams popped in and you guys got to show off your knowledge a little bit. I hope that the room being in the shape of a triangle will help you remember it. And I'm going to leave these things up for just a little bit. I'll probably have to adjust for my U.S. history class, but I'm going to leave the triangle up for at least one more day so that your learning can kind of take seat. And then also for our students that are absent today, they can see it tomorrow as well. So again, as always, thank you for your time and attention. If you got any question on your notes, I can help you out. Hang on to your notes through tomorrow because you will turn them in tomorrow. You'll turn them in tomorrow. Actually, let me, Isaac, if I may, what is due tomorrow is this page and this page, okay? 2 grades for the week. You paid attention all week. You should have this stuff already done. This is what will be due tomorrow. So, clean up. You're ready for bed. Yar. My computer was fuzzy.